start in terms of with some introductions first so people know who we are, and so probably just a quick in terms of who you are, what you're doing, and sort of a brief background in terms of where you are today. Probably we'll go from Aaron. You're sort of the first one onto my right here. So Aaron, you start the show.
Hi, my name is Aaron Day. I am currently running for President of the United States as a Republican in the primary, but my background is as a serial entrepreneur. Started my first company in 1995, sold that in 2001, spent a little bit of time in venture capital, then started another company, healthcare company in 2004, which was shredded by Obamacare, Dodd-Frank, and some other regulatory issues. And so hell hath no fury like an entrepreneur scorned. And that really got me into the path of liberty, activism, and cryptocurrency. Got my first Bitcoin in 2012 and have been really on the whole decentralization freedom path ever since. And I'm running for president specifically because I feel like there's an existential threat to crypto being posed right now by various components to the U.S. government, but this is obviously a global phenomenon. So we really need to fight for both decentralization, and we will also simultaneously
want to stop CBDC, which will lead to centralization and absolute tyranny. So that's my brief spiel.
So when you mentioned Obamas, we've actually got Obamas here in Sydney. They're causing havoc in Sydney at the moment.
Oh, yeah?
That's a speaking gigs, so causing a bit of havoc at the moment. So they're getting a few complaints that shutting streets with all their 20-car motorcades flowing through Sydney yesterday. So just, well, thank you, Aaron. Really appreciate that intro. Mark, it's the next one.
Yep, my name is Mark Fidelman. I run a tokenization agency called Smart Blocks. We're out of Southern California. I'm not running for president. I am in training to be an attorney, whatever that means, for completely different things, but I assure you I will contribute to the crypto space just like Doug is doing, and possibly as Aaron's new SEC chairman, replacing Garen Gensler.
Nice. Thanks, Mark. Tron?
I'm also not running for president, although if I was, it'd be Electron, right? Also a former serial entrepreneur. I was the lead developer on Ravencoin. Currently, I'm the chair of the Utah Blockchain Coalition, which has helped Utah legislature pass a bunch of kind of crypto-friendly laws here in the state of Utah. Just currently a crypto fan, still a crypto fan. First exposure was in 2013. So.
Nice. Fantastic, John. Thank you. Doug?
Sure. I'm not running for president either. I am a lawyer, but I am not a cat. If you remember that. But no, I'm a practicing lawyer in New York. I do complex commercial litigation for a living. Quite a bit of blockchain advice nowadays, sort of a new thing in the past year or so for me. I teach blockchain law and technology at George Washington Law School in DC. I have a few startups in the space: Mango Farm, Ravencoin IPFS, hardware wallet called Ice Wallet, and I'm a big crypto enthusiast. I like decentralized projects, and I've worked with Tron on the Ravencoin Foundation, and I stick to the decentralized projects. So for the most part, I'm an enthusiast of Bitcoin, Ravencoin, and here and there a few others.
Fantastic, thank you, Doug. And myself, I'm LuisMiguelAleixo. I'm the co-founder and managing director of BrickBC Projects. We tokenize Australian real estate property, but before this gig, and still currently, I am a CPA accountant in Australia, and still guide and mentor businesses here in Australia. Some of the guys that I've been looking after and mentoring for quite a number of years. So again, that's when it comes sort of from that background, I guess you get to see a lot of the issues when it comes to compliance and the frustrations when it comes to people be able to control their wealth and so forth. So I guess in terms of the frustrations around traditional real estate got us in terms of doing something about it and actually tokenizing real estate. And today we tokenize real estate on the Ravencoin blockchain. which we're very grateful for, to have such great technology that obviously Tron was very much part of it, to bringing that to market to make things easier, how people go about owning and having some benefits when it comes to tokenized real estate. Otherwise, they won't be able to in that traditional way. But I've been a bit fan of seeing Mark some of the posts he puts up around tokenized real estate. And again, some great content there, Mark, what you've been sharing out there. And again, there was sort of one this morning. So some great content, what you've been sharing out. And obviously a massive advocate in terms of tokenized real estate, and helps us in terms of obviously get out there in terms of especially what tokenized real estate can do to the global people anywhere in the world, really, in terms of making that impact. So today we're sort of we've got a couple of topic points to discuss: stable coins and the future, and their future in digital currencies. Obviously, there's been a lot of talk of late in terms of stable coins. Obviously, your powers over there in the US are very negative, especially towards stable coins and what the future might hold. There was a scary moment that we had, obviously, a couple of weeks ago with the Silicon Valley Bank. So probably just with the USDC stablecoin. Obviously, there's a lot of stablecoins out there. You've got stablecoins that are backed by US dollars. Some are algorithm stable coins, so quite a vast, and we saw what happened with a couple of algorithm ones in the last 2 years. So I guess there's different models in terms of how stable coins work, but stable coins do play an important part, especially when it comes to tokenized assets, especially real estate, in terms of the role it plays. So I guess in terms of the discussion point today, just basically framing and maybe using USDC as an example in terms of the importance and given the scary moment that happened. And probably for those people that sort of not aware what, so USDC, for example, stable coin, it's always, you always have, reserves, US dollars reserves in the bank account or in treasuries, as USDC is. You got backed by US treasuries or US dollars in the bank. That's always one for one. That's the whole point about a stable coin. So I guess when they had around $3.3 billion USDC Circle, which is the company behind USDC, when they had $1.3 billion of cash sitting in the bank account with the Silicon Valley Bank, and I think it was that Friday 2 weeks ago when it was when it collapsed. Obviously, it caused havoc with the USDC coin. USDC, there's around $43.4 billion in circulation as of January. And when you have, $3.3 billion that could no longer be there, given the collapse, it caused a massive havoc. So I think the USDC that Friday, it depegged to around 87 cents, as low as 87 cents from its one-to-one. So it caused a massive havoc in the market. Then obviously the US government came out that weekend and said, no, it's all good. We'll actually back the deposits of Silicon Valley, which obviously then restored that one-to-one. So just sort of teeing up the topic and given the issues, probably from you, Aaron, probably start with you again, Aaron, in terms of how do you see in terms of stable coins, in terms of do they have a future in terms of in the whole digital currencies in going forward, given obviously I think the importance it plays in the whole ecosystem, in blockchain ecosystem?
Well, I think that the current stable coins, the main ones, USDC and Tether, there's significant risk around them. I don't even know why they trade at one-to-one. I mean, first of all, they're centralized. Secondly, some of them are built on tokens that may themselves be, based on an illegal security. So who knows what's going to happen with Ethereum? You have to trust the audit, which, there's not a great track record in this space of people providing accurate information about audits. And now you also have to take into consideration the underlying stability of the dollar itself and the underlying stability of the banking system. So I think USDC and Tether I don't know if USDC is facing legal action to the extent that Tether is, but Tether is under all kinds of investigation by the CFTC and by the SEC and by others globally. So I understand the importance of the concept of a stable coin, but if the dollar itself isn't stable, which I just saw that the Federal Reserve just announced their first loss in history, And obviously we have a financial collapse within this country, but then we have other countries as quickly as they can moving off of the dollar as the world's global reserve currency. To me, I think people should be considering switching to something like maybe a BTC or a decentralized crypto. That should become the stable coin, not a unstable fiat tied to a centralized third-party token. That's my take on stable coins.
No, some great points there. That it's at the moment, obviously, they're trying to given the stability in terms of banks at the moment, and I think they're probably more hurt. It's that's what a massive question in terms of that backing. Is it really there? I think.
Well, on top of that, I don't think the U.S. government is keen on there being these third-party stable coins either. So I think you're going to see a coordinated additional regulatory issues going on there, and then groups like BlackRock will speak about stable coins. And BlackRock has a history of, I think the CEO of BlackRock is known as a shadow regulator. They helped push Dodd-Frank. They tend to push regulation that they themselves benefit from because of their size and scale. So I could see a future where the only stable coin can exist is one that is backed by an organization that has $8 trillion in assets under management or something like that. So I can see that being the direction that stable coins go from a regulatory perspective in the US.
Yeah, that's some great points there. Same question, Mark, to you in terms of what's your thoughts around that?
Yeah, I mean, I share a lot of what Aaron said. My point of view is a little different. I look at these things as, why are stable coins, ironically, why are they almost going down because of fiat? What are stable coins so tied to fiat that if fiat fails, then the stable coins fail? Then what's the point of a stable coin? That's what I don't understand. And that's why I move more to the security token space. It's backed by real assets, not the failing policies of the US government. And this is just the beginning. I mean, this crisis is, I think, threefold. One, we've already seen banks starting to fail, small and regional banks starting to fail. I think phase 2 is a big commercial real estate crisis. You're going to see a credit crunch as a result of all of these banks not being able to lend or not wanting to lend, or a whole host of reasons. So where are they going to go? I think they should go to us and say, hey, we want to tokenize it and bring it to the people, or bring it to other investors that want a different way of helping us fund these commercial real estate properties. There's I heard $2 trillion in commercial real estate loans that need to be refinanced in the next 3 years. $2 trillion. Banks aren't going to be able to handle that. So that means the government steps in again, which means phase 3, I think, is a big government problem. We're going to have an issue with increased government spending and costs because of that spending. And so now they're going to owe more and more to their creditors. That's an increased inflation. This is a freaking nightmare. And there's a lot I think we could do to help mitigate that space. And we're just very, very small, very, very young. But this, I think, speaks volumes to what a security token space can be for not just real estate, for almost anything. But because of this impending crisis, I think it's twofold, CRE and the government. We need to put and position ourselves in a place that helps mitigate some of these issues. The world's not ready, and frankly, we're not ready because of how difficult it is to tokenize some of these assets. But we should be positioning ourselves to take advantage of this impending opportunity with the collapse of, I wouldn't say the collapse, but the credit crunches and the problems that the government's going to have with the debt, at least here in the US.
That's a good point there, Mark, especially with commercial real estate. I totally agree with that. And so I think we've seen obviously issues in the past in some, not so much similar circumstances, but obviously the crunch that had happened before. But I think we've got different circumstances now with obviously COVID. You've got different set of variables in terms of recovery, in terms of, a lot of businesses have been downscaling their floor size in terms of how they operate, because a lot of people are working from home. I think that adds another layer in terms of what's to come. And then we start talking
especially
about
commercial
value.
office.
Correct,
yeah,
right.
Commercial office is in big trouble.
Yeah, so I think I agree. I think it causes a major case for tokenizing those commercial real estate properties that basically where they get their money from, how they're going to refinance. And so I totally agree with what you said about that. Yeah.
And even if they can refinance, think about the interest rate they're going to get on it. It's not a fully occupied building. The interest rates have gone up. This is the crisis. So again, I think the government will have to step in, and hopefully business flows our way. I think we're a better solution overall, but we'll see.
Yeah, that's some good points. Some points, Tron, from your perspective, on the same thing.
Yeah. So I agree with Aaron that you're building on top of the fiat system, so you have all those risks. Those risks were, I guess, exposed recently. Before that, it's sort of like it's the full faith in of the U.S. government kind of thing. But a lot of those risks were exposed, in the last couple of weeks. But I do like the fact that you can move them kind of 24/7. You can kind of shift in and out of them, quickly and easily through the various exchanges, et cetera. So I like that part. I'm a big fan of over collateralized stable coins. So DAI specifically is kind of has really weathered a lot of things kind of during these last however many years it's been running. So I'm a big fan of that one as well, especially now. Again, I think some of this fiat risk was we'll just say exposed, right? It was probably existed prior to that, and maybe people were more aware of it than I was, but a lot of it was just exposed recently. So it kind of does shift your mindset and kind of make sure you don't have too much of that exposure and stay within the FDIC limits, et cetera. So.
Fantastic. Some good points there. Doug, from your perspective?
Yeah. So, I mean, stable coins are a tricky thing for me. And here's why. In a sense, what a stable coin is an unregulated money market fund. And, which historically, with I think one or two exceptions, Reserve Primary and one other small one, money market funds have sort of never broken the buck. But they're a heavily regulated industry. They're broker dealers. You have SIPC insurance. You've got segregated accounts. There's a lot of protections that have been baked in over the years for people that invest in these things. Stable coins don't have any of the above. And the reason I say it's tricky is I'm a big believer in market-based solutions, right? If a stable coin sort of properly discloses its reserves, and by the way, they're not dollar-backed. They're backed by other assets, and the assets can be treasury securities. As we know, treasury securities are not necessarily, the font of stability when you have timing risk associated with and interest rate differentials associated with, your liabilities and your assets. So SVB, what brought it down was having long-dated treasuries and short-dated liabilities. So, there is risk inherent in stable coins. And disclosure is critically important. Now, what does that mean? On the one hand, you would expect, I think somebody said this, it might have been Mark, you would expect there to be some discount, that the market would impose the discipline of a discount to a stable coin because there's not full disclosure. The audits are, really not fully trustworthy. They're not even audits most of the time. And there could be risk associated with the holdings. Markets aren't doing that. These things are maintaining a relatively stable peg. Even algorithmic stable coins that have plummeted in 24 hours notice. So markets really aren't working to sort of impose that discipline. I'm not a big fan of regulation for regulation's sake, but I think in the context of stable coins, we need at least full and complete audited disclosure. If somebody is going to go out there and say, we're backed by 1-to-1 by X, because I'll tell you, I mean, one of my, large cases when I was a younger lawyer was, the Stanford securities litigation, and it was securities, and it was a Ponzi scheme, it was all sorts of stuff. But what Stanford did was he took money from retirees and others. I didn't represent him; I represented the law firm that represented him. And he took money from them and called what he gave them a certificate of deposit, which was a deposit interest in an Antiguan bank. And the fraud, which it's not alleged fraud, it's actual fraud, he was convicted, was then he took that money and instead of investing in it in productive assets like treasury securities, like a bank ordinarily does, he bought polo fields and all sorts of other stuff, and spent it on helicopters. My point being, I mean, there was a lack of disclosure in that case about the underlying use of the proceeds of the certificates of deposit. So investors give money and then it went into sort of a black box. And he was defrauding people about sort of what was inside that black box and what the performance was. that can happen with a bank, that can happen with a stable coin, it can happen with any box in which people deposit their money and expect to get their money back based upon an unsecured promise. In the money market context, that's protected against by segregated accounts. You put money with a broker, it's your money. It's not the broker's general fund. You have insurance, FDIC insurance, to protect you up to $250,000 when you put money into the bank box. I'm concerned about people dumping so much money into the stablecoin box without any sort of market metric that seems to be working and without any regulation. So, I did a talk last Friday with Minister Consul of El Salvador and some regulators and whatever. And this question was asked, and my short answer, which I'll give right now, is they scare me. Because I think stablecoins do have systemic implications for the crypto space. And if one of the major stables goes to zero because somebody absconded with the money, the audit's bad, whatever it may be, guess what's going to happen to Bitcoin? Guess what's going to happen to everything that's bought with those stablecoins? And that I care about. I don't use stablecoins. They're irrelevant to my life. But Bitcoin is something that I use, and I really don't want Bitcoin to be impacted by, sort of the decline in value of an asset that I don't really know what's behind it. And I'm trusting, publications on a website with lackluster audits from some auditor I don't know. So that's my sort of long-winded answer. I don't like them, and I would prefer that they have a little bit more disclosure at a minimum. Let's put it that way.
That's some great points there. And just be careful, because Deloitte's are hearing your conversation. Deloitte's actually the auditors for the USDC. So Deloitte's actually published their monthly report that states.
For Deloitte, you know how many securities cases I've done over the course of my life that have been audited by big auditing firms?
Since as you pointed out before, we've seen so many cases in terms of major accounting firms, global accounting firms, and so some of the fraud that's gone on. We had
Enron passed its audit.
Enron
passed its quarterly 3 weeks before or 4 weeks before it went under. So,
probably from a practical point of view, obviously in terms of us tokenizing real estate, and at the moment the importance of the stablecoin, and obviously from a BRIC-BC perspective, we use USDC, and there's two reasons why. When we were doing our research around 2.5 years ago as to what stablecoin we're going to use, we need to make sure that obviously gave us that one-to-one. So basically, when people are buying our tokens in our properties, we want to make sure we've got those funds there when it comes to selling the property. Because if it's $2.6 million that we need to have, and people put their tokens, we need to make sure when it comes to settlement, whether that's in 6 months' time, 3 months' time, we've got those funds there ready to sell on the property. So again, for us, was important to choose a stable coin that gave us some stability, from that perspective. And we chose USDC because, obviously, look, as Doug said, look, just because an accounting firm says that's what it is, there's the reserves backing that, the USDC in circulation doesn't mean it's going to be there. But again, for us, and obviously giving us, for me, it gave me a more peace of mind compared to other stable coins in the market. So we weren't going to do an algorithm one. It had to be 1:1 in terms of US dollars. That was important. And the thing is, in terms of the property side of things, I thought that 2 years ago, I thought it's a sure thing. But I think given what's happening probably over the last 12 months, obviously we had a deep pegging of an algorithm stable coin, and that sort of got me thinking about in terms of maybe actually holding in USDC until the settlement is actually not a good thing. So what we actually started doing is actually just sort of when people buy with sort of 2-3 day timeline, we basically convert that into Australian dollars. So it's sitting there ready for the settlement of the property. Yes, it's fiat, but at the moment that's all we know. And for us, we want to make sure that funds are there. It sits with one of the 4 major banks here in Australia, the Commonwealth Bank of Australia. Again, it doesn't mean anything given obviously the prior history of major banks. But again, this is all we got at the moment. And for us, that's the sort of the more secure way of us holding funds ready to settle on the property. So that's more from a practical perspective as to why USD in particular is important to us. But again, we probably hold 2 or 3 days of USDC and then convert that in fiat, Australian fiat. Secondly, in terms of we actually use USDC also to pay our overseas service providers. So, for example, obviously DigiShares, they're based out of Denmark, and being our service provider in terms of our platform, obviously with Klaus. We paid them in USDC only because it's so much easier than using traditional, foreign exchange transfers. It takes time, it's costly, and so when you compare it to using a stable coin, so if the service is X amount of dollars, we transfer X amount of dollars via USDC. So for us, it's actually a good means of a way to pay. Because again, it'd be nice to do Bitcoin, but again, it's also the fluctuations is obviously an issue when you're paying service providers based on those invoices you got. So just give us that practical from a practical point of view in terms of how we're using USDC and why. Look, I like to think maybe in 5 years' time, things will be from a blockchain perspective, and especially from a cryptocurrency and the stability of the crypto market. We can say that we can use any crypto to be able to pay. We can use Ravencoin because we know it's going to be stable in 5 years' time. Well, getting to that point where everything's been more stable, and be able to use those cryptos a bit more effectively in terms of having that certainty when you are paying people or when you actually are ready to settle the property. But I think at the moment, from a practical perspective, it's one of those things that we need to have it. I think we need to have it. Is it the ideal? No, it's not the ideal. But I think, given that the practicalities, I think that's how it is at the moment. And but yeah, so just to give you that sort of perspective from where we sit from what we're doing day to day and how we're using these different tools, and again, it's so I think it'll be interesting given the noise that's being made around stable coins and given the points we've all made. I think it'll be very interesting around the future, given obviously governments want to introduce their CBDC as well as our next topic. But I'm still not convinced that there's going to be a future for this stable coins, given all the issues with governments around the world and given the debacles that we're just seeing, as we mentioned before.
Let me ask you, in your business, if you had a stable coin and the government, Australia, for example, issued a CBDC, wouldn't you want to, because stable coins don't provide decentralization, they provide, sort of a means to get in and out of crypto assets, but they don't provide the benefits of a decentralized crypto like Bitcoin. So if you had a CBDC, wouldn't it serve for you the same function without a lot of the risk associated with stable coins? And isn't it something that you would readily use if you're already using stable coins? Just a question for you, practically.
Again, I think like most of you, I'm very anti CBDC, and I guess we'll talk that deeper in our next topic. But no, I wouldn't use CBDC. I mean, as I said, I think as our industry matures in the next few years, I think that we'll have those solutions to have that stability in terms of like from our perspective, having that stability, knowing that when we sell tokens, we've got the funds there to settle on the property. So I think I'm pretty confident, and I know there's some really smart people in our industry, and I think as it matures and more people come in, I think those solutions will be there, and I don't think we need to use CBDC because again, it just goes against all our values in terms of what we're doing. Yeah.
Yep.
Any more points before we move on to the next topic? Any more points from the floor?
On the
I'll respond to
CBDC?
your point. I'll
just on
respond to
the
your
stable
point
coins?
when we do CBDCs.
Sorry, Doug?
I said I'll respond to your point when we do CBDCs.
Yes. Nothing else on stable coins? All good? Now, this is an area that Aaron loves. These central bank digital currencies, CBDCs. I think everybody around the world, all governments around the world, obviously piloting projects to test in terms of how they can use CBDC. Obviously, the Chinese government has obviously implemented the first one. That's obviously up and running. I haven't actually had any feedback in terms of how that's going, but no doubt it's been done very much in a controlled way, and obviously probably not seeing any negative thing because without getting politically, they probably can't say anything negative about it. So, but again, in terms of from an Australian perspective, there's actually been a CBDC pilot called the Australian CBDC pilot of digital finance application. So they've actually started the project. There's a reports and findings coming out in the middle of this year. And they've just actually an update this month in terms of how it's going. And they've actually got participants contributing towards the project from different private sector in terms of educational institutions and the thing that I don't like in terms of the tone of the paper, of this research paper from they're trying to bundle in terms of CBDC with use cases, and they're trying to camouflage it by saying, well, this is a fantastic use case. So they've chosen the participants to be part of this pilot. And so they've actually got, say, for example, I've got just got a list here that they've chose this month. So they've got in terms of using, for example, so the construction industry, which I'm obviously very much involved when it comes to property and construction industry, and there is a major issue when building companies go under. So they've actually got a project in construction payments. They're using USDC for construction payments in the whole ecosystem in terms of how construction payments are made in the industry. So that was one example. And if I can sort of pick out a couple one, there was in terms of livestock auction as another project that that was by Fame Capital that they've put forward as a. So they've chosen 40 use cases to be part of the project. As I said, the thing I don't like about that is that the Australians using these great concepts in terms of, like I said, from the construction payments, it can really play a role in blockchain, providing that solution to the industry. But again, it's been camouflaged because, again, are they saying, is CBDC going to be a thing? Or are they talking about the actual cases being a great solution for these, for the industries like the construction industry? So again, I'm not too sure what other countries, but I'm not sure what the US in terms of their pilot scheme around, USDC, CBDC, as to how they sort of framing it. But I know in Australia they're framing this with some camouflages by some great cases that can be used. But again, that doesn't need to be done as CBDC, which comes back to what you're saying, Doug. Are we going to use CBDC as part of our solution? No. We're going to, and this is what they're saying in terms of these great use cases. It doesn't have to be a CBDC. So again, it's been camouflaged. So again, I'll probably start with you, Aaron, in terms of your thoughts and around the use of the central bank digital currency and its future existence with other digital cryptocurrencies.
Well, I probably have more of an extreme view on this, but I mean, I exited fiat 4 years ago. So I've been bracing for kind of the collapse of fiat and the entire financial system as it's structured right now. And I think a lot of people have this expectation that, well, the dollar's always been the global reserve currency since they've been alive, and that certainly it's solid, the sky's not falling, there's stability here. But if you look at and you zoom out, every fiat currency in human history has failed. There was an analysis of 775 fiat currencies. The average fiat currency only lasts for about 27 years before it collapses. And if you look at the reasons why they collapse, the US dollar is checking off all of those boxes in terms of excessive government spending, corruption, war. You go down the list and it's like, okay, the dollar's kind of on its last legs. So from my perspective, I actually think the CBDC, the use case for the CBDC is totalitarian control. And in the book that I'm publishing, I'm explaining a lot about what is going on in China, what's going on in other countries, what's going on with the WEF and the United Nations in terms of the toolkits that they're putting out, describing how you can use CBDCs in conjunction with social credit scores to tie people's access to money to things like ESG, environmental things, behavior, so on and so forth. So I think this is in the long run, or maybe even the short run, a tool for totalitarian control. So from my perspective, I've gotten completely out of fiat, and I hope other people move out of fiat as quickly as they can, because I really do think that at the end, it's all about centralization and authoritarianism. The United States started a pilot in the fourth quarter of last year through the New York Fed. They've announced Fed Now, which is going to be deployed, I believe, starting in July, which is going to allow for instant transfer of money, as I understand it, between banks. So you won't have to well, they'll sell it as you don't have to wait for all of the delays. But to me, it's just another precursor for being able to implement a CBDC. And everybody from Jerome Powell, the chair of the Federal Reserve, to the head of the Bank of International Settlements, they've all said that a CBDC will be used for tracking and financial surveillance. Nobody's even hiding behind some notion that this is just going to be some application of technology to make things more efficient. Everybody's already thrown out there that it's going to be used as a surveillance tool. So I think CBDC should be resisted at all costs. But at the same time, we need to look at the underlying fact, which is fiat is in the process of failing and the dollar is in the process of collapsing, which I think we're all starting to see more clearly in the last 2 weeks.
Yeah, no, some great points there. It's and again, it's I'm sure every country's got their own pilot going on, and the thing that the thing I don't like, as I said, is like you're saying, it's being framed in a way that people are getting sucked in as being a good thing, and without actually understanding the nitty gritties around in terms of the potential. And we know it has the potential to be very controlling, and then people don't understand that. And again, that's because the government's framing it in this sweet way in terms of what it can do and solve problems, but not knowing the full extent of it. And that's the scary bit, because the average lay person doesn't know. In terms of, if you don't understand blockchain, you will never know in terms of what the issues are, in terms of what this can do for the world. And that's the scary bit, how governments are framing it. Mark, from your perspective?
Yeah. I'm probably more extreme than even Aaron, just because of my experience with government. But CBDCs are like the government's way of saying, I told you so, cryptocurrency world. We're going to take over. They're like a surveillance camera on your wallet. I mean, you imagine if these people get direct control over your money, and let's just say that you and I do something wrong, they can do what Canada did to the trucker protests. They just cut everything off, and then you and I are screwed, right? There's no possible way. We should be resisting this with everything that we've got, because you cannot trust government. That's been proven over and over again. There are some good actors in government. I don't want to throw them all out. But for the most part, if you get on their bad side, look what they do to people. And you want to give them control of your money? No way, not a chance. This, to me, if this goes through, it's finished. I'm going to be like Aaron. All my money's going to be in somebody in decentralized crypto. Maybe it's Bitcoin. Maybe it's Tetraguard. I'm a big fan of. That's where I'm going.
I got a great wallet for you, Mark. You can have the Mango Farm wallet to store all your
Raven
there.
That's right.
That's right, because I'll send you a couple of those NFTs, didn't I? That's good. No, some good points there. And again, it is scary. It's Doug, from your perspective.
Look what they did to you in Australia.
It
was worse. Look what they did to you during COVID in Australia. I mean, imagine if they had control of your money too. What they could do. Oh, you stepped outside, we're going to take $1,000 from you. I mean, come on. No way.
Actually, it's funny to say, because last year when Bruce Fenton was going for the Senate of New Hampshire, as you know, Aaron, on one of the spaces, I got talking to him on it, and he goes, I feel so sorry for you. You've all been in lockdown in Australia, extreme. I said, look, I hate to think about it. That was down in Melbourne, down in Victoria, where they went extreme. They had a number of record days in lockdown. We're here in Queensland, in Brisbane, our state of Queensland. We only had 10 days. So I said, but I understand what you're saying, that extreme way of control. It was just ridiculous. And you're right, in terms of, can you imagine having that way of control? And again, we talk about dictators in the old regimes. And we saw through COVID, these guys became dictators in terms of how they control things. And can you imagine now controlling your money? It's scary, Mark, but the point you made there, it's very scary.
And what if they get hacked? Do we all trust the government to keep control over the hackers? No.
Yeah.
Forget it.
And I think the point is, in the United States, the idea that it would never happen here. They locked people down in their houses.
Yeah,
they required people to wear masks. The government tried to force people to take vaccines. Then they printed 40% of the dollars that were ever in existence and gave them disproportionately to large businesses versus smaller businesses. So the idea that it wouldn't happen in America is provably false. We just went through that kind of tyranny. So yeah, This only goes from bad to worse.
Yeah. Doug, from your perspective?
CBDCs scare the heck out of me. And I don't want my children to grow up in a world, well, they're growing up now. I don't want them to live in a world, and I don't want their children to live in a world where the government has a window on all their financial transactions and can stop them and track them and trace them. Now, with that said, we already live in that world, right? We think we don't, because we all grew up in an era where, you know, the response to somebody asking you, including the government asking you what you spent your money on, was none of your damn business. But that world stopped existing in about 2001, 2002. And the world we live in now is a world in which all of your financial transactions are tracked and traced. They're tracked and traced by a bank, but the bank has, you know, requirements to provide suspicious reports to the government, and the government can subpoena and request information at any point in time. You're fully KYC'd in the system. And basically, we do not have the same level of financial freedom that we had. So my problem isn't necessarily with the concept of a central bank digital currency. Let me explain what I mean by that. We already have digital currency, right? But our banking system in the United States was actually, surprise, surprise, it was designed to be decentralized, right? Our central bank doesn't actually issue the currency. The Treasury issues the currency. There are Federal Reserve notes, and they're printed, and we have coins. But the banks, most of the dollars that are in existence in the system are digital records that sit on a commercial bank's ledger. And each of the individual commercial banks, by issuing loans that are backed by some portion of reserves, they increase the money supply. And those dollars are dollars that are sort of coming out of that commercial bank. The Fed itself was a series of, you know, quasi-private institutions that are geographically segregated. And the Federal Reserve Board, which is really the political body, and the Open Market Committee, those you know, sort of have political connotations. But it's sort of a mixed government and private institution that has some decentralized features. And that's because it came out of an era in which everything was sort of decentralized, right? Even the wildcat banking era. So why am I saying all this? Because the concept of a central bank digital currency, the concern I have is the centralization into one entity. And you know, if it's particularly if it's a programmable central bank digital currency as opposed to a tokenized central bank digital currency. I mean, if a central bank issues a token and people are just trading it in addresses and there's no real tracking of it, I don't see that as being a problem. But my fundamental issue here isn't with the notion of a government issuing a currency on the blockchain. It's with the sort of underlying historical predicate that has led us to this place, which is, you know, sort of the Bank Secrecy Act and the Patriot Act, and sort of how we have come over the 48 years of my lifetime from an era where we had, you know, hard, you know, money backed by gold in pre-71. I was born in 74. To, you know, the ability to have private financial transactions, to the ability where really within the banking system, unless you use cash, you don't have private transactions, to the elimination of cash and the inability to even have a private transaction. That's what concerns me, but that arc really has nothing to do with the tech. It has to do with our attitude. And it has to do with the attitude of our government. We are voting for this, right? If we as American citizens want the Patriot Act as it relates to, you know, our ability to send a transaction by Venmo. I mean, I sent a Venmo transaction 3 weeks ago to one of my developers out of an account that I've been doing the same transaction for 3 years. And they said, for some reason, that transaction was suspicious and I'm not able to use the Venmo account anymore, right? I'm a lawyer and a law professor with a family of 4 and a house. Anybody can Google me and find out where I am. And I can't send a Venmo transaction to a developer, right? So that is the problem. And we are responsible. It's not some amorphous government. In America, our government is our government, right? The majority of people don't care about this issue. And that's the problem. Because if we cared about it and we talked to people about it and they started to realize the adverse consequences of it, if they really saw what the future is about here, they would probably change it. But we've just let this slippery slope go on and on and on and on. And things like, you know, we find ourselves in a world in which, you know, people use children as an excuse to, you know, regulate, you know, all sorts of things. And now they use terrorism as an excuse to regulate all sorts of things. And in the span of 2001 to today, we've gone from, you know, a system with some modicum of financial privacy to one in which today, currently, forget CBDCs, we do not have any financial privacy in the United States unless you use cash. Or you know, interestingly, Visa debit cards that you can buy at CVS without KYCing for, you know, you can buy stacks of them like this without KYCing yourself because Visa has good lobbyists. It's sort of an absurd system, and it's not a system, CBDC or not, it's not a system where I want my kids' children to grow up in. I want people to be able to have financial freedom, and I am not afraid of the terrorist boogeyman as much as many of the people who sort of think they're doing the Lord's work by tracking and tracing all of our financial transactions. So I said a lot. I'll stop.
Well, we also have crypto, don't we, Doug? Isn't that why crypto started gaining popularity, and things like Monero are pretty popular? So there is the choice. And that's because I think that's in part response to the Patriot Act. And you're right, we're completely surveilled, but at least there's kind of a private buffer or a bunch of private buffers that the government has to get through and to sue to get your money, or to levy some kind of lien to get your money. There's still a process. I just think the problem with CBDCs is they could just shut it off like that. They're the central authority. And if somebody doesn't like you, good luck suing the government to get it back. You know, they'll throw an army at you. That's not a system I'll ever be in. And I'm putting that on camera.
But I think the thing is, people don't realize that it's already that. What Doug said is absolutely true. I mean, ask Kanye West about whether or not they can shut off your bank account.
Well, surprisingly, he's not very smart. He should have had that in trusts. He should have had that in different places that didn't directly have his social security number. There's things he could have done. I don't know who's advising him, but there are things that he could have done to get away from that.
But there are a number of gun stores that have had issues with having their bank account shut off. There are religious groups that have had their, and you see this increasingly, you know, people like Alex Jones, others that speak out and aren't following a woke agenda. These larger banks are following woke agendas, and they're cutting people off now. The money that's in your bank account really doesn't belong to you anyway. I mean, people should try to take a look at their terms of service on their existing bank account. Go try to take $10,000 out of a bank right now. If they may not have the money, you often will have to set up an appointment, get 3 of your buddies together to go try to take all your money out of the bank. You can't do it today. That's already the case. But of course, most people don't know that we're not on the gold standard. Most people don't know we're not even doing fractional reserves anymore. You used to have 10% fractional reserves in the United States. Because of the COVID situation, that was wiped away. There's 0% requirement for reserves right now. It's a complete Ponzi. So yeah, tough.
And it is scary when you look at things like, I mean, I don't view this from a political perspective, right? I view this from the perspective, political pendulums swing, right? Over the arc of 20, 30 years, they swing back and forth, back and forth. This is a structural problem, right? Freedom isn't a political issue. And for me, and when I look at what was done to those Canadian truckers, now I'm not staking a claim on whether what they did or did not do was illegal or not illegal under Canadian law. Okay, that's not my issue. But the notion that even if someone is protesting, even if it's illegal under local law, and you shut down their finances, to me that is one of the scariest things that I have seen. That's what you expect out of China. It is not what I expected out of Canada, and it was shock to me. That was even almost more shocking than getting locked in my house. Right? Getting locked in my house, I mean, they've done it before, there's quarantines, all of that stuff, but I've never seen a circumstance where a Western nation has shut down the financial ability of people, the ability of people who were engaged in a protest to transact. That's the biggest affront to what we have as the First Amendment and the notion of financial and personal freedom that I believe that I've seen in my lifetime in a Western country. It scared the heck out of me. And I agree with everything that everybody said. I mean, you cannot have a system, well, we already do, but you cannot have a system where sort of programmatically a government can just do that, because, if history is any guide, a government will exercise that at some point.
Under emergency powers. They just make this stuff up as they go along.
Yeah.
I'll pick up on that point, one of the points you made, Doug, about the banks. So we had a bank royal commission here 3 years ago before COVID, and some of the things that were happening, and it sort of came, and so they actually issued a royal commission, which is sort of the highest level, inquiry comes from a federal government perspective. So the whole formality around and what was actually found, some of these major banks, and I'm talking about the major 4 banks here in Australia, there was shown there was money laundering issues. There was all this corruption that went on with the major banks. Now you think that they've got to comply with the high standards in terms when it comes to these things. And they talk about in terms of terrorism, in terms of money laundering, and these are the banks who are actually participating, major banks participating in this very thing in terms of money laundering. And they're going about in terms of blockchain and Bitcoin, in terms of using by terrorists and what have you. But here we go, these major banks were actually participating. They were just fortunate enough that COVID came, and basically it got sort of put down in the media. It didn't get much attention, because then the COVID came, and what was on the front papers and in the media, television every day? It was the COVID. So basically, they escaped, and they just got a little slap on the wrist. You've been a naughty boys, and here's a fine, and basically got pushed aside. Yeah.
Look, you know what interests me about that is that I worked for 9 years on the 9/11 litigation. It was a big part of my life, right? And if you look at all the sort of things that we've done, all the KYC AML things that we've done since 9/11, none of it would have stopped the hijackers from doing exactly what they did. They used small transactions through the banking system with passports and identity documentation, and I mean, there's nothing that we are doing right now that would prevent the withdrawals that they made out of the ATMs and the wire transfers that occurred, unless you had sort of information about 3 hops of people away. But there's a will, there's a way. If somebody wants to do an illicit transaction, they're going to do it, right? It's going to happen some way or another way. I don't care if they send bags of cash via drone to each other. If someone wants to get cash from A to B without being tracked, they're going to do it. And what we're doing is putting a dragnet around the rest of society, right? To capture the things that are uncapturable. And the consequence of it is, we find ourselves in a situation where a law professor can't send a payment to a developer without some algorithm picking it up and saying you can't do that. Or even worse, they probably filed 3 suspicious activity reports on me. Now, I don't want I don't want the word suspicious associated with my name.
They'll use that in court. You'll see them basically go in front of Congress or wherever and say, oh, there's been thousands and thousands of suspicious activity reports related to crypto. Well, that just meant that somebody was pulling out more money than $10,000, and so they legally have to write. But it sounds horrible, right? For someone who doesn't know, it's just an amount of money that they had to file this paperwork. It sounds like, there's all this suspicious activity going on, but it's really more of a labeling.
Yeah, right. They should call it a track and trace report.
Yeah, it sounds better than those suspicious activity reports related to this thing. Yeah, because there's probably been lots of suspicious activity reports related to buying cars or an RV or getting a house or whatever. They just don't talk about that much.
Look at some of these markets that really aren't fully KYC'd, right? You've got the gold market. I have a piece of gold on my finger. I didn't buy this piece of gold with a passport. I could take it off my finger. I could run to a pawn shop right now and get money for it. It's not KYC'd. I could use that money for something illicit. Just everything now. I mean, if you read up on KYC, some of the rules. I mean, it's sector by sector by sector. Crypto was the first one, which was sort of an easy target. I mean, everything needs to be KYC, but then, it's going to be art. And then what's next? If it's NFTs, then it's going to be collectibles. So you can't buy a baseball card without it. And at some point, I mean, it's just everything that you do. Basically, you have to prove who you are, prove your passport, and you can't do anything private. That's not what we are in America, or at least historically not what we have been.
Which, as you know, Doug, it's a major barrier for tokenized real estate. That KYC element, it's a major barrier. It's that's another story, but we've spoken that a few times about that being a massive issue, and which obviously we're living and breathing in terms of that having that KYC issue. But Tron, coming to you now in terms of the same question around the CBDC, but probably give us obviously, being in terms of the lead developer for Ravencoin blockchain, obviously being a fantastic coder, and then obviously the IT brain, but also having a great commercial sense in terms of who you are. But do you want to sort of give us in terms of, probably for the people that are listening, in terms of from a coding perspective, CBDC and what you can do? Pretty powerful, right?
Yeah, well, I think it depends on how they create them. I mean, there's lots of different routes, right? I would imagine that they're not going to make this a decentralized blockchain that kind of does its own thing or whatever, with its own transparency. It's not going to be a mirror of. It's not going to be Bitcoin, but for the dollar, right? It's probably going to have the ability to change values, reverse transactions, do all that kind of stuff. So. Yeah, my biggest experience with the CBDCs was actually helping Bit, which was under the Medici Ventures portfolio company. And I know people now, I had lunch with them the other day, that just said they had to leave Bit because, it's CBDCs and their own kind of personal philosophies about CBDCs, which is the same stuff that you guys have been talking about. And so some of the, what I would consider the top developers, have left. And I had lunch with them the other day. And that one actually started out, I wouldn't say I was like a super fan of CBDCs, but I was like, okay, it was actually specifically for Barbados. It was specifically for the different islands. It was specifically because they were having problems with correspondent banks within these islands. And so it was trying to solve that. And the cross product, when it went from one island's money to another island's money, it was actually converted into Bitcoin and then converted back into the other. So Bitcoin was kind of acting as a kind of this foundation for just translating between the currencies or whatever. Anyway, the project since has kind of just shifted. CBDCs have become something that lots of countries are looking into. Has become something completely different than how it was originally conceived. So that's my thought. Probably most of you who know me, I put freedom advocate, and so I would agree with almost all of what was said, with the possible exception that we voted for this from Doug. I think
I knew you wouldn't like that one. I knew you wouldn't like it.
I think we're now in a system whereby how we vote makes zero difference towards this kind of like direction that we're kind of heading. But the exception to that, I agree, could potentially lead to totalitarian stuff. The Canada thing was also frightening, terrifying. I mean, that the idea that they did that, especially in Canada, that surprised me too. I would actually consider Canada, even in some areas, maybe a little bit, kind of more freedom oriented than we have become.
Trying to remember the ministry of the 3-week duration ministry of misinformation. Imagine if one of the tools within the arsenal of the ministry of misinformation was to, if they didn't like what you said, that not only would they send a letter through the FBI to Twitter, but then they'd shut your bank account off.
Yeah.
Well, this is already the case in China. There are 23 million people that are blacklisted in China. And one of the main reasons for this is if you speak out against the government. And so they have clamped down on your money, on where you can live, on your transportation options. That's not a dystopian nightmare. That's live in China and, coming soon to a country near you.
Yeah, I would agree. It's worse in China. They have a social scoring. So then they take away income or you take away money if your social score drops below a certain level. Forget all that. we can't allow that to happen.
Agree.
I think
I have to go because I had another thing at 5:00 and it's already 5:06. Next month or next quarter, whenever we're going to do this, this is one of my favorite ones to do. So
thanks, Doug.
Thanks for joining, Doug.
All right.
Bye,
take
Doug.
care. Aaron, it was great to see you in person.
Great to see you too. Yeah.
All right. Take care, everyone.
Take care. Bye. But in terms of, I think if we all sort of look in terms of our respective countries, I know here in Australia, without actually being called a CBDC, I think they've actually been running a similar sort of platform, or without obviously being on the blockchain. I know some of our social welfare here, especially some of the particular areas where there's troubles with alcohol, Indigenous communities, and also some of the sort of older areas where the pensions and problems with gambling. I know in terms of where they get their social security payments, it's put into a card. So when they actually go and buy their groceries, yes, it's approved, they can buy with that. But if they go and say into a casino, it actually blocks it from then actually using it to obviously to play the casino. Or if they go and try to buy alcohol in some of the Indigenous community with alcohol problems, they can't buy alcohol, it's banned. So if they try to use it to buy alcohol, it just won't accept it. So it's a card. But again, whether it's a CBDC or in this form, it doesn't matter. It's the principles are the same, where they're controlling what people can buy and not buy. And I think if we sort of transform that into CBDC, it's quite scary, because if they say, okay, well, you know what? Nobody can buy smokes anymore. That means in the code, they can actually block that from buying smokes, right? You know?
Yep.
Which is, it's quite scary.
Or buying a gas stove here in the United States, you know, they're
Right.
trying to shut all that down. It's
Right.
crazy stuff. Or if they say, well, this impacts the climate, so you can't buy it anymore.
Yeah.
I think the bigger, also a big threat is, what about we talk about individual things. What about the total data collection that they're going to have on each of us and their ability to spy on us?
Medical information, what you're purchasing, all of that.
Everything. So then how do they use that against us if they want to? You know, if we've been targeted for some reason, maybe Tron and I are speaking out against the government here. Clearly Aaron is. And they want to penalize us, and we never even know. And all of a sudden things are going wrong. It would be easy for them to do.
Yep.
Forget about that. There's no
And
chance I'm going to participate in that.
And I guess with you, Aaron, I mean, as a couple of conversations I had with Bruce Fenton when he was going for the Senate, was that we need more people like you and Bruce to get into those government halls to actually educate these guys, especially the sort of the older generation, that they unless somebody sits down and actually explains what it is, they'll never listen unless they're inside in those halls of government, to have the time to actually take them through in baby steps. And I think that's I think it's going to be people like you that'll make a change in getting into those halls of government.
Well, so actually the bulk of my campaign, I'm writing 4 books, but the first book is about sound money. And it's about describing a lot of what we've discussed, the dystopian nature of CBDCs and social credit scores, discussing the fact that all fiat fails and that we're kind of on this fast track. But the most important part is, along with the book, I'm launching a website that is going to provide a directory for people to download self-custody wallets and to find resources for going to buy self-custody silver, gold, crypto. So because no politician is going to solve any problem if the people aren't willing to stand up and say no to tyranny, basically. So the thrust of my campaign is to try to provide tools and a platform to educate people to take control of their own destiny. And then if I happen to get elected, then there are things that I can do. But if people are unwilling to stand up, it doesn't matter who's elected. I mean, there's going to be no change in outcome if people are just going to accept whatever gets thrown their way. And frankly, COVID was not a great case study for freedom in the United States.
Well, it just went to show you that there's too many people that will just follow the herd and not resist. They just accept what they're told and they go do what they're told, and there's not a lot of critical thinking going on. So yeah, you're right.
But
I think
3%.
Just on that, I think we're seeing the consequence now, Mark, in terms of, where people just, the herd followed, and because the government said you had to, and I'm talking about vaccinations, and obviously now we're seeing what's happening, all this research and the consequence of some of these vaccines. And again, it's too late for some people who are actually suffering from heart problems. Again, it doesn't matter what sort of fence you sit on in terms of vaccine being right or wrong. It's just a point that people just follow what the government said you had to. And now some people, I've come across so many people that they've got heart problems. People my age never had a heart problem before, even people younger, people in their 30s, men who are now got heart problems for the rest of their life. That, again, it's scary. But,
well, it shows the problem of centralization. I mean, that is a problem of if you have to trust the experts and you're not given a choice, that could be an extinction level event for humanity. And there's a movement globally to do this, to move towards one global government, one central currency tied to all of these climate agendas and everything else. And that's not the way to go for society. And to me, it's the end of free will.
Yeah. Which sort of rolls into the next topic in terms of, especially from an SEC perspective, in categorizing proof of stakes as securities. We've obviously heard that quite a few times now in terms of our global friend, Gary, that sort of made those statements. And I guess in terms of and again, yeah, some things they said 2-3 years ago, 5 years ago, what they're saying now, it's obviously very contradictory. Some of the things that are sort of statements being made and the way they see things being classified as securities and not. And I guess in terms of, are they going to change their mind in terms of in a year's time and actually say proof of work blockchains also classed as securities? Again, obviously we know, obviously the Raven coin where we tokenize our properties on, and obviously Bitcoin, they're proof of work chains, as some of the other ones. Obviously Ethereum's gone from being a proof of work to a proof of stake now, last year. That transition, obviously, that the SEC is saying now, Ethereum could possibly be a security, and obviously they're not being legal. I guess in terms of when we sort of start talking about, obviously things being built on obviously the blockchains, on Ravencoin, on Bitcoin blockchain, Ethereum, in terms of projects that are being built on, that's a major issue, because obviously as someone who builds, in terms of what we're doing on the blockchain, it's actually really critical for us to know exactly where we stand. Obviously at the moment, not an issue because we're doing on a proof of work blockchain like Ravencoin. It's not an issue now. But again, what do we see as the issue? It's probably trying to probably lead us on this one. In terms of how the SEC, which obviously, look, the rest of the world follows in terms of what the SEC is saying. The US was obviously guys other leaders when it comes to financial markets and the compliance that goes around and all that sort of stuff. So I guess in terms of what is the issues there?
Well, I mean, I wish Doug was here because he's got a lot of background experience in this, but it seems really strange to make it a distinction between proof of work and proof of stake. I would argue that there's more proof of stake securities because you have to distribute the coins, right? So if you're not doing it proof of work, where you have kind of this process, this lottery thing that's going. To distribute the coins, kind of on this metered pattern, then to initially distribute them, you have to give them to somebody or sell them to somebody, right? So that even with proof of stake, you said, all right, well, who has the stake, right, to start with? And so either the person that creates it says, well, I've got them all, and so I'm going to do it, and then I'm going to give some away or sell some. Well, as soon as you sell them, then you start on the first step of the Howey test, right? An investment of money, and so you go down that track. On Ethereum, there's kind of two parts to Ethereum. Unfortunately, they did sell some initially. I know because I purchased some initially, and then after that, then it was proof of work. But they did sell some initially, and then they were proof of work. And I don't think that really changes the equation. I think what changes the equation of it being security potentially is the fact that you basically kind of sold them initially. That's at least step one. And there's, do people think they're going to get a profit from it? Is it based on the efforts of others, et cetera? So I think those are the tests. I don't see why switching from proof of work to proof of stake for Ethereum makes it any more of a security. I do think it makes it more likely that it can be stopped. Meaning a proof of work is just sort of distributed all over, just, video cards and machines or whatever running kind of wherever they are in the world playing this lottery game. And so without knocking on tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of doors and saying, you got to stop doing this, even if you take an entire country, which is the major one offline, right? China, it's distributed to the rest of the world. So it has a better chance of just sort of saying, you just can't stop it. Whereas a proof of stake, I think if you had enough money, or government type level powers to kind of buy up a whole bunch and kind of take over the network and things like that, it has a little bit more risk. Although something really large like Ethereum would be tough. You'd kind of see it coming. But those are my thoughts. I do think, one other thought is right now, I think the SEC is intentionally sowing not making clarity, which is just horrible. And it seems like should be completely illegal to do that, to have just not even give an answer, right? Is this legal or not under your rules? To not give an answer to that seems like it should be illegal under the administrative procedure rules or whatever's kind of governing the administrative state, which we've kind of handed all this power over to, that should be illegal. I mean, that should, we should just fix that right away and make that illegal to be that vague about something, and then just do actions and just say, we're going after you for this kind of thing that we wouldn't even answer the question for. That should just be illegal. It's sort of ridiculous at the moment. So anyway, hopefully the courts sort it out quickly. Hopefully we make it illegal potentially to be that vague. But something's got to change, because it's really not the rule of law now. It's sort of the rule of men that kind of decide this, and that isn't the way it's supposed to be.
But even some of the case studies so far, they've just been wishy-washy. Like there's no, like, you got one and then you get the other one. It's like, well, there's no consistency. It's like,
exactly. It's not consistent. You can't get an answer, so you can't have like guidance to know that you're doing the right thing. It's really bad. Yeah.
So in terms of again, just probably use, like, say, for example, the Ethereum blockchain, and obviously people that have been building at the moment, they've obviously made a stance as to their classing as security, because Gary's made that very clear. So what projects that are built on there, where do they stand? Like if they're classed as illegal, what happens to those projects that have been built on it? Are they classed as illegal as well?
That's a good question. So if there is a genuine attack on crypto for that reason kind of thing, and saying, oh, we're going to make it a security because we already have these 1934, 1940 Exchange Act rules, so that we can basically pull them off of something that doesn't have those licenses, pull it off Coinbase, pull it off Binance, or shut it down trading on those things, then it just makes it more difficult to obtain Ethereum. I don't know that it changes the status of the tokens that are built on top of Ethereum, because those each independently have their own status. Were those tokens created and then sold? Were they intention? A lot of the tokens, as an example, right, would just be, no, we created it as a security. We know it's a security, and if we sold it, we got the the KYC and they were accredited or whatever. There's jurisdictions all over for securities, and they have different rules. But if you follow those rules, it shouldn't change the status of the token that's issued on top of it. But it does potentially change the status of the base chain and the ability to kind of get those tokens from what you would consider just, I'm going to turn my US dollars or my my Australian dollars into X amount of Ethereum so I can pay gas fees and things like that. It potentially could change that ability.
And I guess, at the extreme level, in terms of, again, using Ethereum as an example, if they're saying, well, it's illegal because you're classed as security, you haven't done the right thing, here's a massive fine, because obviously we know Ethereum is obviously central, more at the centralized end of the spectrum. Here's a massive fine that they can't actually afford to pay, because it just, again, it does impact those projects, because if the chain's shut down, I guess it does impact the projects that are actually being built on top of that chain. Yeah,
and the fine would go to whom? Because I think if you said, the Ethereum Foundation, well, if the Ethereum Foundation says it doesn't need us anymore, meaning it runs kind of without it. Now it does, assist or help it, but I don't know that it is dependent upon it, right? Meaning there's Ethereum nodes that would continue to run whether or not the Ethereum Foundation existed or not. So
but I could see them suing node owners. That's not out of the question. If you want to take it to an extreme. And I think most of the nodes or most of the power is actually in the United States, which is one of the risk factors for Ethereum. So this is one of the reasons I never got into Ethereum, and one of the reasons I got into Ravencoin actually early on was we saw what was going on with the ICOs, and it seemed like Ravencoin had a decentralized base layer protocol that would allow for SEC compliant security tokens. I don't think there should be a lot of surprise that Ethereum is potentially at risk, given that they did raise money and that they do have this proof of stake mechanism that is centralized and at risk at multiple levels. So,
and Aaron, just going with you on this, it's so you think in terms of, do you think it's a massive issue in terms of if they do class a chain as illegal, like Ethereum, for example? They do classify as illegal, they haven't done the right thing. And what do you think the impact's going to be on the whole projects that have actually been built on that?
Well, I mean, think about it. What publicly traded company is going to look at that and say, yeah, I'm going to launch something on Ethereum now because there's been an SEC enforcement action. Who knows what that enforcement action, does to shut down that network. So yeah, it's going to have a chilling effect on commercial behavior. There will still be people, the same people that are doing DeFi for the sake of doing DeFi are going to continue to do DeFi, but it's large corporate entities that might be evaluating using Ethereum as a platform that are going to think twice, and their risk management and compliance group is probably going to look at this and say, no, we probably shouldn't do this. So it's definitely going to have a substantial negative effect on Ethereum. But if you look at what's going on there, there's a full court press on from the CFTC, from the SEC, from the Treasury, from the IRS, and from the Federal Reserve against crypto right now on multiple fronts. I mean, you have Tron, not TronBlack, but you have Justin Sun. He's being sued. You have a number of DeFi projects being sued. You had Signature Bank shut down, and it's not even clear Signature Bank was shut down for economic reasons. It seems like that was actually politically motivated because it was a major crypto bank. And I think from my perspective, it comes down to this: crypto is an existential threat to fiat. As fiat is continuing to diminish, if people have an alternative, there's been no point in human history where people have had an alternative to a state-controlled fiat currency. So they see that their situation, their monopoly fiat system is going down. So they need to do everything that they can to shut down on-ramps, off-ramps, and alternatives. And I think that's what you're seeing right now. And I've never seen this much coordinated effort from various branches of the government to stop crypto at one particular moment in time. The last week to 2 weeks has been just breathtaking.
Yeah, that's right. Mark, over to you, Mark, in terms of, where do you see things in terms of when it comes to SEC and their view on the chains?
Well, I mean, clearly there's an unprecedented attack against crypto, and it's gonna continue. The only thing holding this whole thing back, at least in the States here, are the courts. I think Ripple will win their lawsuit, and that will have a chilling effect on the SEC. Unfortunately, the SEC's got unlimited resources, and they might still continue despite a court ruling. We'll see what happens with Ripple. I think they're going to win. But the rest of it, I mean, let's face it, there are some things happening in crypto that are fraudulent. We've seen them over and over again. We can't self-police. I think if the SEC were smart, they would come up with a regulatory framework that they work with Congress on and just say, yeah, the Howey test is almost 100 years old. Let's come out with some sort of other test to say, hey, this is truly a utility. This is a security, and maybe there's another class, a hybrid class that has some rules and things around it. Clearly, people want crypto. And they want this idea of, taking control of the monetary system out of the government's hands. I don't think the government can stop it, no matter if they're taking away the on-ramps and the off-ramps. There's always going to be a way, just like with other things in life. I think that if they were to embrace it and allow innovation to happen here in the States, if we don't allow this innovation to happen in the States, it's going to go someplace else. And what does that do for us? And that would be a shame if that were to happen. But that's what's happening. They're putting the SEC alone is putting a chilling effect on everybody that's involved in crypto, unfortunately. So the way I see it is crypto is going to win in the long term. Security tokens, I think, are already there. They just make it very, very difficult. Look how difficult it was for INX just to get their first listing up. I think he told me it took 3 years. But I think we're going to win over in the security token space. We're going to streamline it. We're going to see more and more things that are tokenized, and I don't see the government being able to stop that. On more of the utility side, I think we'll see a bunch of different regulations come out of Congress. Hopefully, there's been some proposals that say this is a clear test to say what this is that you're trying to create.
Yeah, it's some good points there, and I guess in terms of it's like just coming back to the Ethereum blockchain, is that when we were looking for, because we tokenized our first property on the Ethereum blockchain, our Brisbane property was our first one. And again, I won't sort of bore you with all the details. I think I've shared that many times. It started off as gas fees, major issues, and then we sort of led to other issues in terms of where we needed to find an alternative chain. And obviously at that time, there was already talk about obviously the pathway for the Ethereum to go to a proof of stake environment. So I guess we switched because we needed to for the long term. And again, we switched to Ravencoin with our second property, our Gold Coast property, because again, it started off as a gas fee problem, but there's other things that obviously once we sort of researched and what the risk and issues were around, we switched to Ravencoin providers that again, you don't just switch blockchains for the sake of it. It's a massive decision, and we made a massive decision because we saw the confidence in terms of what the Ravencoin blockchain is doing in tokenized assets, and having the ability to talk to people like Tron, obviously, in terms of we couldn't get any closer. Him as the co-founder and obviously the lead developer, and picking his brain on some of those things. And again, it's it was a critical decision we made, and again, it's I guess when a company's looking in terms of where they're going to tokenize, and it doesn't have to be a big company, Aaron. I mean, like I said, we're not a company, we're a private company ourselves. We're a small startup that we started 2 years ago. I think it's whether you're a small startup or a big company. I think the decisions when you're looking at risk and obviously the fundamentals where you're tokenizing, I think they're the same. And I guess we made that critical decision to switch to a chain that we were comfortable with, and not just now, but for the future and the scalability. I always hammered Tron in terms of what is the scalability. And again, for us to tick that box, there's no problems with scalability, because obviously, as more people and more of my colleagues, tokenize real estate, plan to tokenize real estate, and I'm saying, come over here. This is where we're doing it. It becomes obviously an easy way to show them in terms of what those fundamentals are of the Ravencoin blockchain to tokenize assets on. And I think sometimes people sometimes get swayed by the things that are promised them in terms of funding, in terms of benefits with other chains to go and tokenize. But again, as we know, the Ravencoin blockchain, it's totally at the extreme end of decentralization, and there's no company running it. There's only obviously with the foundation supporting it, but there's no and that was a big thing.
In fact, I just wanted to correct you on I'm not a co-founder because there was no company. It's an open source project, code's available. I was lead developer and Overstock, division Medici Ventures division Overstock kind of helped fund the development. But there was never a Ravencoin company. Still isn't. So
what's your one of the initial persons?
Involved? You can call me a lead developer or something. I helped lead the team that built the first version. So
always use the lame terms. I found it.
But there's other developers on it now. It's very decentralized. The foundation isn't in charge of it, but it does kind of monitor the ecosystem just to kind of make sure that it kind of has that we're quickly aware if there's stuff happening. So
fantastic. Well, gents, as we sort of close up in terms of with the last topic, which basically I think it just sort of puts in terms of the so Aaron, did I go to you on this one on the blockchains in terms of? Did you get a chance to? I've lost track of this.
I think I squeezed some stuff in there.
Yeah.
What was this? What was the original question?
Just in terms of obviously with how the SEC classifies. Obviously, they've classified now the proof of stake chains as securities, and the illegality in terms of who they are, and obviously Ethereum. They've sort of thrown Ethereum.
I think the one thing I'd interject on this is a friend of mine here in New Hampshire started a company called Library, LBRY, which also they own Odyssey. So it's basically the decentralized censorship-resistant version of YouTube. And they just lost a major case with the SEC. And in fact, that really set the bar, because if there was anything that kind of looked more like a utility token than a security token, it's the LBRY token. I have LBRY tokens, and I've only used them as a utility token on the platform to actually upload content. And so the fact that they lost that case is going to make it a lot easier for the SEC to crack down on other things. I mean, if Library is a security, then certainly Ethereum is.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think
so. That company has been completely wiped out. They haven't been able to make payroll. There are no employees left. Like it's a devastating situation to see. So Yeah.
And again, and I think as sort of mentioned earlier, I think they are on attack, and there's many people now on the attack in terms of being attacked. So it'll be interesting how this sort of pans out, because again, as you made a point, Ron, when you got no clarity as to what rules you're supposed to be following, and you're just trying to get on with business, and then you're told that no, you can't do that. It's just like, how can you do business around that? You can't do business, and it's illegal. As you said, it's illegal, totally illegal. But again, it's sort of we're sort of finishing off on a positive note. I mean, it's all positive, of course, but in terms of when we start talking about tokenized assets, and obviously, and whether it's real estate or whether it's bonds or whether it's equities, I guess BlackRock made a massive statement in the last couple of weeks to their shareholders to make a point, or to the investors to make a point, that they are looking at blockchain technology, especially firstly in looking in terms of how they might be able to use the equity and bonds to provide more efficiencies in terms of what they do. I guess in terms of, always a concern when big players come in, and obviously we know the layers of issues that comes with those big organizations as to whether they're doing it for the right reasons. And I'm always concerned in terms of that they're going to drag the old shit, as I call it, into a great platform of blockchain to be saying the same old shit, but in a new way. And that's always things that concerns me. And that's probably my Aussie bluntness of looking at things, but that's sort of my big concern. But again, in saying that, I think it's made a massive statement that a global company that is looking at blockchain technology, and no doubt now all other companies are looking in terms of how can we use it. Obviously, they're huge accumulator of real estate, as we know, around the world. I think in Chicago, I think someone was saying Chicago, they've been actually accumulating just everyday homes, single family homes. They've just been accumulating those. So I guess in terms of, to get your views, probably you, Mark, first, get your views in terms of, is that a good thing for our industry, our tokenized assets industry as a whole? Having BlackRock making that statement in terms of, if they do go, is that a good thing for our industry?
Well, I certainly think so. If you look at some of the things that should be tokenized that aren't, I mean, there's trillions and trillions locked up in illiquid investments where investors want to get out and smaller investors want to get in. And that's a massive opportunity. And we all know the issues with making that happen. It could be very expensive. I'm actually working with Doug right now to make it less expensive and more streamlined. And so BlackRock sees it. They're going to have to help with regulation. And if they really do wield, a magic wand when it comes to regulations, perhaps they can help make this come to fruition. I do think they made that statement. The CEO made that statement for his own benefit. They always do. There's nothing wrong with that. That's what they're supposed to do for corporations. So I do see it as a very positive thing. And I would hope that government will get involved as well. I mean, why isn't the government tokenizing their properties, government-owned properties or debt or what have you? Seems like a more efficient, more effective way to do it. I don't know why we haven't seen that in government yet. Maybe some of you guys have. But I do think that's the future. We're looking 5-10 years down the line. We will look back on this day and we'll say, I told you so. I don't see any other alternative. It makes perfect sense to go that direction versus what we have to do now and how inefficient that is. If anyone's raised money to buy a property and realizing they're stuck in it for 9 years, if you're an investor, and that's just one thing. And then all the other things that are out there that could be tokenized and given out to smaller investors that want to participate, or even if you want to raise money. If you want to raise money, it's a much better way to do it. We as an industry have to make it a lot easier, and we got to provide that liquidity that people need in order to keep these things going.
Absolutely. Aaron, from your perspective, is that a good thing or a bad thing? BlackRock coming
I think it's great that they're bringing awareness to the topic so that people might start looking at the space. But I think that their track record and their history with respect to regulation, particularly you look at Dodd-Frank and everything else. What I worry about is, I got involved with Ravencoin because in my startups, I've raised like $15 million from angel investors over the years, which is a really hard thing to do, dealing with SEC documentation and everything else. And so one of the things that appealed to me about Ravencoin is the idea of empowering small businesses to raise money, to open up new funding alternatives to companies that were never able to raise money and investment opportunities for people that were never able to invest. So to me, that's the exciting thing about it. My daughter recently started a business selling, of all things, slime. And she accepted Ravencoin and everything else, but it's a kind of business that could probably use $20,000 worth of capital. Well, the costs of you can't really do a Reg CF fundraise to raise $20,000. That's actually out of the question. We haven't really solved that particular problem. So it's good that they're bringing awareness to the space. But what I worry about if it's BlackRock, is this going to be a situation where we end up with regulation where the only people that can do security token offerings are, if you're doing $10 million fundraisers or above. That's the thing that I worry about, is that it doesn't end up helping startups and small businesses, and that it just ends up being a way of applying the technology in a crony regulated way to only medium to large size businesses. So it's a mixed bag.
Yeah, that's my concern. That's a good point there. Tron, in terms of your perspective, good thing or a bad thing, BlackRock?
Well, it's for people to see how it works and efficiencies. I mean, it's a better ledger system. So it's great from that perspective. I don't want to endorse BlackRock or even buying single family homes. That's caused kind of a different problem. There's a bunch of other problems that kind of BlackRock specifically has caused. But yeah, I mean, having other people tokenize real estate and show how that works. I agree with Aaron. I think we need to bring the bar down really, really low. I mean, in my really early, this was right after Ravencoin was released. One of my examples was just having a kid that has a lemonade stand being able to go over and to neighbors and sell equity in their lemonade stand. And then they're both equity holders and also customers in this thing, and to show how that works from an entrepreneurial perspective and kind of get a new generation of people that kind of understand how this is supposed to work. That's what I'd like to see. I'd like to see the bar come down to where it's like $1, $5, $2, just like so low that and even if that money, that that value is paid in Raven or whatever, because you're even collecting dollars or whatever, with a credit card it becomes too expensive because of the 35 cents plus fees kind of thing. But the technology has the ability to bring it down ridiculously low. And it's really just regulations that are preventing that, at least in the US. I'm sure some country on its own could actually use that as an ecosystem and actually kind of start bootstrap their economy using that, and teach people how to do that. So anyway, that's what I'd like to see. In the US, it's seeming like further and further away from possibility. But anyway, that's my thoughts.
Yeah, that example, lemonade stand, Tron, that's a great actually way to, especially at high school level, to introduce that to educate kids in terms of business and using blockchain. That's a great example, which I'm a big advocate in terms of using that at high school level to start them learning the fundamentals, using that basic example. Yeah, which is great. Yeah. Look, in terms of in terms of BlackRock, as I said, it does put a lot of attention out there globally, but I just hope they got the right the right way to use it, and we don't get the same old, but in a new way in terms of how they do things. Probably, Mark, from a tokenized real estate perspective, we start talking about global in terms of is having a global presence. I know you've been talking with Grant Cardone, which is the property guru when it comes to real estate. And obviously, he's been doing traditional real estate. I know he comes out to Australia, does his road shows around the world, and including Australia and so forth. I think it was actually out here recently, I think, from memory. But so you sort of, you sort of started sort of playing with the idea with him in terms of maybe tokenizing real estate. You want to sort of share some of the things around that?
Well, I'm not planning anything with him yet. I've just been trying to convince him to do it, and he's expressed in multiple locations. He's expressed his desire to do it. He just doesn't know the advantages. He doesn't know how. He's looking for a way to do it. He likes the idea of it. But so far, no one's been able to present him a compelling case. And as you know, we're working behind the scenes to put that together.
And that's fantastic, because again, that especially from a tokenized real estate perspective, that brings a massive attention. If you have somebody do it, like if he does it, it'll help us. It'll help my colleagues that are tokenizing real estate. That for someone like him to do it, okay, well, it's accepted. Here all of a sudden we've got this global figure that's doing it, and it just makes our job a lot easier, right? Well, gents, so that was a fantastic session. Any probably some closing thoughts? I know we've gone a bit over time, about a bit over an hour and a half, as I promised, but I do apologise for that. But I think been some great discussions and sharing your thoughts on the topics. Probably start with you, Aaron. Closing thoughts before we close up.
I would just say this is a good time to exit fiat and to start moving into crypto, both for as peer-to-peer cash. I think people need to start using crypto as an alternative. And then, yeah, the tokenization of everything, because as governments are collapsing across the world, we're going to need a way to trade. And so chains like Ravencoin enable people to do peer-to-peer commerce without third parties in the middle. And I think that's going to become vitally important very soon.
Fantastic. Well, thank you, Aaron. I really appreciate your time, and all the best in terms of your campaign to be 2024 US president. So again, look forward to your tweets. I know you're very active with tweets and social media. So again, it's fantastic what you're doing, and really wish you all the best. And again, thank you for your time for today.
Thank you for having me.
Tron, closing thoughts from you?
Yeah, so the main points I think I'd like to emphasize would be no CBDCs, just because of their danger. And we need SEC and regulatory clarity on tokenization and on crypto and things like that. I think that would go a long way to kind of helping the industry.
Fantastic. Thank you, Tron. Really appreciate your time. I know you're always very kind with your time in terms of the sessions that I do put on, and really appreciate, and just making sure to remind Monica the Gold Coast and the Sunshine Coast are waiting for you for your longest stay when you do come out to Australia.
That was great. I appreciate it. The tour you gave us was fantastic. It was great to be out there.
No, thank you. Mark, closing thoughts from you?
Yeah, I've moved from crypto to security tokens almost exclusively, both real estate and the tokenization of really any real world asset that makes sense, anything over $5-10 million. And I do think it's the future. It makes total sense. And once we have some efficiencies and ways of doing this quicker and more cost effective, it's going to happen. So now's the time to get in.
Fantastic. Thank you, Mark, for your time and for your thoughts today. Really appreciate it. And always enjoy reading your posts. And there's another post this morning, which I haven't actually had. I only got halfway through it. I think it was a 25 post on Twitter.
It's a long way. It's how I learn. So I'm forced to learn about these things because I don't like looking like an idiot all the time. Some of the time is okay, but most of the time, no.
But they're very informative tweets. Really enjoy reading them. And obviously, you got your YouTube channel as well. Some great content there, which you've actually had. You've actually had Doug on. You've also had Tron on your show there on YouTube.
Yep. I'm going through each of you guys. You just don't know it yet.
Right, fantastic. Now, again, I really appreciate Mark. Again, let's keep talking, and where I can help in terms of some of the things like with Grant Cardone. If there's anything that you need that I can sort of share any context and so forth, please let me know.
Will do, for sure.
Well, again, it's we have these sessions, the roundtable on tokenized assets. It's a bi-monthly session, and really enjoyed for the people that do come on, like Aaron and Tron and Mark today, and Doug. Really enjoyed sharing and really sort of you guys sharing the in-depth in terms of around the topic. And given obviously we all come from different backgrounds, so it's good to get those different perspectives. So again, really appreciate it. And my closing thoughts is basically, as pretty much what I agree with everybody said. I think we just got to keep educating, keep making people aware that actually aren't aware of what can be achieved with blockchain technology, especially around tokenized assets, and more specifically around tokenized real estate, in terms of giving people the ability to have control of their wealth in going forward. That basically that the everyday person hasn't really had the chance, especially when it comes to real estate. And now they can, using obviously the new ways of blockchain and in an efficient way, and provide them with that they can actually achieve their goals and aspirations and dreams now in a new frontier of tokenized assets. So thank you all. have a great day, afternoon, evening for you over there in the US, and for me the day's just starting. So take care, stay safe, and again I'll share in terms of these across all our platforms. There will also be an NFT created on the Ravencoin blockchain, as we always do. We always create an NFT of this session, and it'll be minted in the Ravencoin blockchain, and I'll send some updates as well. Share it out.
Thank you.
Take care, guys. Really appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Bye-bye.
Bye bye.